Garland Nixon here. The EU is in deep and serious economic trouble. Let's talk about why. Good morning, or as Alexander Mercouris would say, good day. How's everyone today? Plenty to talk about. As always, we're going to talk about the EU and what's happening there. I think it's of great consequence. I think we're in kind of monumental times right now. Very, very important times to understand. Certainly, there are many people who are afraid that, the current proxy war that the United States wars of various and sundry types that the U.S. empire is fighting against Russia and China could spin out of control and end up in a nuclear confrontation. As I say all the time, well, we can't control that right now. Apparently, there are not enough people that are motivated to take to the streets and push back against the government. So we shall see what we shall see. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We've made it so far. So let's hopefully mankind continues. All right. But let's talk about what's happening. Monumental times, and I'm going to start with my first thoughts. These are big stuff. The reality is that various empires from Europe for centuries have, ruled the high seas, have gone around the world to, think about it. Why do the people of Brazil speak Portuguese? Why do the people all throughout Latin America speak Spanish? Right, and in the northern part, for the most part, North America, for the most part, they speak English. Right? Why is that? Well, there was a decision made that when the European empires came over here to take all the land and the resources, that the south side would go to the Catholics, and the north would go to the Protestants. And so that's what we have now. Catholicism dominates the South, and Protestantism, is that a word? I don't know, dominates the north of the Americas. And so then you've got Africa. You had, what was it, 1864, I believe it was. They had a meeting in Belgium. They had a convention to determine how they were going to split up Africa. In other words, they did not recognize the people of Africa as having a right to independence and sovereignty. And the question was, A, how were they going to split up control of the land? Who was going to control the various parts of Africa and the Middle East? But number two, and more importantly, that really meant who was going to get to grab those resources and use them for the benefit of Europe. Okay, so it was always the issues. The issues have been for centuries European empires going to Africa, going to Latin America, even going to North America, right? To take over various lands, to force the people to speak the language of choice for the particular empire, and to appropriate the resources. And I think some people may not agree with me, and I may be wrong. I think we're at a time when that has come to a screeching halt, and I think Ukraine is part of it. That part of this is that the global South, as they call it, didn't have the economic or military wherewithal to resist the empires. They did. There was a lot of resistance, but not overall to completely push them out. And here and there it happened. But even now, if you look at what's still going on in the Middle East, if you look at NATO overthrowing Libya and still oppressing a lot of countries, everything that happens, and look at Lebanon, where Lebanon's woes are as a result of European/US imperial machinations keeping their countries down. So this bottom line is, this is still going on, where the US empire has absorbed the various empires in the EU, and it is now taking those under its umbrella of NATO, of the EU. Those are the umbrella organizations that it's used to gather all of its vassal states together, and boom, now what the plan is for the US is, out of desperation, it's Russia and China are rising as powerful nations. Iran is rising as a powerful nation. India is rising as a powerful nation. And keep in mind something, the EU had been arising economically to a point where it started to wake up and say, you know, we might want some particular independence and sovereignty ourselves. And that was the problem. And so the EU had even come up with an economic model wherein they could get cheap energy from Russia, which kept their costs down, which meant that their people could live a fairly decent life, right? Because let's not forget, while um, the Brits or the Spanish or whoever the hell were going around the world stealing stuff, oftentimes at home they had a feudalist society with a lot of serfs. Most of the people were poor. Most of the benefits of imperialism, the benefits of imperialism never ever come home to the people. Now, in the American Empire, they did somewhat for a while, and then that came to a screeching halt starting in the 80s. All right. So the EU had a model, and that model was, we've got this gigantic country next to us with all the resources we need, and they're willing to sell it to us at a reasonable price. That model was working for the EU. The EU's building, and that country is Russia, particularly energy, because energy is very important for industry. And in this day and age, it's very important for the quality of life. Right now, in the long run, we shall see what's going to happen with that. There are a lot of people that says it could end life. Well, we shall see where that goes. But as for now, for the purpose of this conversation, cheap Russian energy was the model, has been the model for the EU to start to grow. Lately, the EU started saying, we may want our own army, we may want our own military. So the United States is looking at the EU. Let's not forget, John Bolton wrote a book. And in that book, John Bolton argued that after China, the EU was seen as the big economic threat. What the EU didn't understand, the people of the EU didn't understand, maybe the leaders, I don't know, I don't think they give a crap, but is that the United States is a fickle beast and sees everyone and everything as a threat. It's total and complete narcissistic paranoia. And from the perspective of a narcissist, everyone else is out there to feed their narcissistic desires, and everyone's out to get them. So the EU thought they were allies to the United States, and the US saw the EU as A, competitors, and B, subordinates. So now it's come time to pay up, where the EU has benefited from a very arbitrary and capricious and violent US empire. They have benefited from that, but it's time to pay up, because now the US empire is facing what the US empire sees as threats, China and Russia sees as threats. Right? What most of us, what reasonable people see as other countries that are arising and looking out for their own economic benefits, the US sees that as a threat, because the US doesn't want it. The bottom line is this, and people need to learn this. The oligarchs in the United States see the people as a threat. If the people get more voting power, if the people get more economic power, they'll be able to challenge the ruling elite class, right? They don't want that, so they got to keep you down. Also, this same mentality applies to so-called vassals or allies. They see the EU as a threat. Therefore, they've got to keep them down. They've got to keep them down. So where am I going with this? So this model had to be broken by the US. The US. So here's what I'm getting at. The US looked at the EU. Remember, the EU was talking about building its own army and this and that, becoming independent of the US empire. So the US empire says, okay, we got a couple problems here. Number one, the EU is living off Russian natural resources and being very successful. We don't like the EU being successful because they may get froggy and independent. Number two, their model off of Russian resources is working quite well, which means they'll get more powerful and they'll challenge us even more. We can't have that. Number two, they're buying stuff from Russia, which means that Russia is benefiting. Well, we can't have that because Russia's growing, and we won't be able to coerce them and boss them around. It's about not being able, if you raise up, look, it's China, the same thing. China brought 800 million people out of poverty. That's not what the US empire wants. It wants them all in poverty. If you're poor, the United States can push you around. You got no weapons, you got no money, we can push you around. China's got money and weapons. We can't push them around. Russia's got what? China and money and weapons. We can't push them around. We're still trying. And they have an economic model that's worked, that is powerful, that's bulletproof, in that Russia's economic model is powerful and bulletproof because they have commodities. China's economic model right now, I don't know about the long one, but right now it's very powerful for the current time. It's powerful and bulletproof simply because they have a powerful industrial base and they have allies that can provide the commodities that they want, allies that can purchase the commodities that they produce. They've got strong economic models. Both of those countries are doing well economically. The United States doesn't want that. And think about the EU. The EU is doing that too. They've got a good economic model. It's growing. The US must stop all of them. The EU, if you do business with China, if you do business with Russia, you're going to do better, and China and Russia are going to grow. The US doesn't want that. The US wants everybody down. The difference is China and Russia and Iran and India are smart enough to see it and say, hey, man, look, we're all right with you, bro, but you ain't going to drag us down, right? Where the EU has given up its sovereignty to the United States. So it's nothing but a tool. It's nothing but a blunt object. So the United States can kill two birds with one stone. It can destroy the EU economy, therein wiping out a competitor, at the same time wiping out part of the customer base for both Russia and China. So it sees that I can kill three birds with one stone, bottom line, economically. So those poor suckers in the EU are going along with what the US is, and the US is just saying, yeah, sanction them more, stop buying oil. And then, but right now the US is buying more Russian oil. Why? Because the U.S. wants their economy to be strong. They're going out, how can we get more oil? We want to, and they're buying more stuff. They just, in fact, in the last couple of days, the Biden administration just backed off fertilizer, some other things. Yeah, go buy more Russian stuff. While the EU's like, buy less Russian stuff. Why is that? Because the U.S. wants its economy stronger and it wants the EU's economy weaker, and it's working. If you got idiots and patsies, they're going to do what they tell you to do to the detriment of their own people. The EU is crapping out right now. How long the EU accepts this? Do they allow it to hit bottom right now? I'd say yeah. I'd say they go the route of Sri Lanka, where, I mean, if you really look at what happened with Sri Lanka, it was the U.S. debt. You know, they're like, oh, it's the Chinese debt trap. Well, China's got like 3% of their debt, and we got the rest. How's it a debt trap for China? But what we want is to put the world in a debt trap, to put the world in a place where we can coerce them. And the EU somehow thinks that we're on their side. If the EU was smart, they'd be going to say, hey, China and Russia, how can we take care of ourselves? Because the US is trying to destroy all three of us, and they would be right. Here's the problem, too. The U.S. economic system, which actually the U.S. economic system is the economic system that controls all of its patsies and so-called allies. And that, might I add, here's the other part, and that the U.S. has a need to force on the rest of the world, Remember, Russia and China tend to go to your country and say, let's make a business deal. And they make a business deal and go home. The U.S. says, we're coming to your country, we're taking your shit, and you ain't going to say anything about it. Oh, by the way, you have to do neoliberalism right now, or we'll kill you, and we'll overthrow your government, we'll murder lots of people, very, very violent. So obviously, it's obvious which option, given those options, that any country would choose. The only reason it would choose the U.S. is out of fear, or if the U.S. is actually able to overthrow its government. So let's move forward. When I believe it was yesterday, there was an announcement that Mario Draghi, who is the Italian prime minister, that he stepped down, or president, whatever it is. He wrote his resignation and handed in. Whether it'll be accepted, etc., we don't know. But part of what's going on is the mainstream media is not showing the level of protest that's going on in Italy and throughout Europe. People are starting to hit the streets. People are starting to get angry. Bottom line is, one by one, the governments are falling in the EU. And the question is, the problem is that the neoliberals, the neoconservatives, these monsters have taken control of all of the mechanisms of politics, the political mechanisms. So when Bojo falls, you've got a Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. When one falls, you've got another flavor of the same thing waiting behind, because this monster has taken over the full political machine in these countries. So the question is, how are they going to, the people going to be able to wiggle out from under the, the foot of the U.S. empire? That remains to be seen. I think if the EU, well, no, let's don't think about it. Let's be honest with this thing. If the EU allows the U.S. to continue its economic destruction, of that particular economic bloc, it will crash. It will crash. See, one of the things people say, oh, look at Sri Lanka, people are in the street freaking out, blah, 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 because they don't have gas and food and things like that. Look, Sri Lanka is not a impoverished country, but it's a poor, it's, traditionally not had the living standards of the EU, right? The people in the EU have a higher expectation of their living standard. They have a very high expectation of their living standard. They got further to fall. So when and if they continue following U.S. and down this Russian sanction disastrous path, then they will fall much further. If you got a poor country and the poor country gets poorer, it's poorer, but it's still poor. It may not be happy, but it's still poor. Okay. If you have a person who's at a higher economic level and they become poor, they can't handle it. They don't know how to deal with poor. They've never been poor, and they don't have an expectation of poor, and they will be furious. So if somebody asks me, well, do you think we'll see the Sri Lanka kind of people wandering around swimming in the president's pool thing going on in EU? I would imagine much worse. I would imagine that if they don't wise up and get out from under this monster before they have a complete fall, which is next winter, then it's going to be far worse than Sri Lanka. The people of the EU will tear that place to shreds. They will tear the Europe limb from limb. The people in the UK, the people in France, the people in Germany, on and on. They are not accustomed to poverty, and it gets cold in the winter. They've already the Poles, who are the most rabid anti-Russian people you can ever find. Oh, Russia's terrible, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we must be behind the sanction for Russia. But they're starting to run out of energy, and they ain't seen a damn thing as to boast to what's coming next winter. So, and Poland is cold, gets cold in the winter. Poland is real. It's a lot of these places. They get cold as hell in the winter, right? Really cold. And their winter starts early and it lasts late. So, September, October, you're getting pretty damn cold all the way up into May. You got all that period of time. What happens? How are you going to keep warm in the cities of Poland and throughout? So even though the Polish people may argue, yay, we hate Russia, we got to stop Russia. When they start waking up frozen, when their pipes are bursting, when their everything, their industry is crashing, they're all out of work, out of food, and out of time, as I like to say. They'll tear that place apart too. They may still say, we hate Russia, but we're pissed right now because we're hungry, and it will tear that place apart. And they're going to have a big problem, particularly in Poland, but a lot of places, with Ukrainian refugees, because the people are there fleeing the war, whatever the case may be. And people are going to blame them. They're going to get mad. They're going to blame them. How dare these people come here? It's all your fault, Ukrainian refugees. Somebody get a rope. You know how that goes. They're the outsider. They're from Ukraine and all blah, blah, blah. And then there's going to be violence against Ukrainian refugees. They'll be running for their friggin' lives before you know it. And recently, let me add this in. I believe, president, prime minister, or whatever, Serbia was speaking. And he said, here's what he said, basically. I'm going to paraphrase. Fairly soon, sometime soon, maybe in the fall, the battle for eastern Ukraine will be over and Russia will have won. At that time, now this is what he's saying. At that time, Vladimir Putin will make a peace offering to NATO. He said to the West, you know what it means, to the U.S. It says, look, we can strike a deal. We can take this thing down. This is all we need to do. And of course, according to what he says, the U.S. empire, but he says whatever, the West will reject it. Well, of course. Of course, absolutely, absolutely. Why is that? Because the U.S. empire, to accept a deal with Russia, to accept anything, would be to say we're no longer in charge of the entire world. So no matter what, they're always living in this dream world. So they'll be like, "No, Russia, you have no say." I mean, Russia can just like take a, we'll have defeated Ukraine, and they'll say, "No, Russia, you have no say here. How dare you try to impose, an outcome of this? You shall surely be defeated on the ground, blah, 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 blah," right? Now, according to him, after that, all hell's going to break loose. And I think what he means is Russia's going on in the Western Ukraine and just flatten any and everything that looks like it's even remotely related to the military or NATO, that they're going all the way to the Polish border, all the way to Lviv, all of it, that Russia's going balls to the wall, as they say, and finish the job and occupy Ukraine, maybe not. I don't know. And then there's other questions too. There's other questions because let's not forget that in December, when Russia made a demand for NATO, there were a couple of things included, including missiles and launchers in like Poland and Romania on their border and stuff like that. Is Russia going to, at that point, strike some of the NATO? They've said, get the hell off of our border. Is Russia going to strike some of the NATO infrastructure on their border? I don't know. That's possible. They may have made a decision. Look, you know what? This is World War III. You guys decided you want World War III. We got it. You got it. We asked you to get your infrastructure off our border, and we're in a fighting mood. So if you ain't gonna get it off of our border, you're gonna. And this is, I've said this before. I think it's possible. I don't know. I'm not predicting anything, that at some point Russia's going to say to the EU, it's going to call their bluff. It's going to say, get your infrastructure off our border. And if the EU says, if NATO says, no, we're keeping it there, then I think Russia's going to say, well, in order to keep it there, you're going to have to fight to keep it there. You ain't going to keep it there unmolested, because we're going to do our best to throw your ass off our border. If it's worth going to war with us to keep your infrastructure on our border, then we're going to fight it out. We're going to see whether or not you can keep it on our border or not. But it ain't staying there unmolested. I just, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the time comes when Russia says to the EU, says to NATO, look, that's enough. You're not going to choke us out putting military bases around our border. What you going to do? You know, it's like sometimes somebody pushes somebody. I always say, why do I take self-defense courses? Because if somebody pushes me into, look, somebody says something, oh, I hate you, Garland, I'll kick your ass. You know what? I'm picking up my stuff. I'm leaving. Hey, man, I don't want any trouble. I'm leaving. I don't want to get in a fight. Ever, ever, ever. I'm getting my stuff and I'm leaving. But if I turn around and I get pushed into a corner and I look and there's nowhere for me to go, and this person's aggressive and they're coming at me, I want to say, okay, you want to come into this corner? It ain't going to be for a friendly corner. And I'm going to do my best to injure that person in every way, shape, and form I can, and get the hell out of that corner. That's what any human being would do. You ever see a little dog, a little cat, a little dog, and they get backed into a corner? They'll run, all this kind of stuff. And then that dog gets backed into a corner and he turns around and he shows his teeth. And you know, that's a little dog. I can kill that dog, but he's going to bite the hell out of me. It ain't going to be pleasant. Or a cat. It's a small cat. I can kill the cat. But let me tell you something. I ain't going to be happy coming out of there, because that cat's going to scratch me every which way but sideways. A cat's only this big. You're a big human. Cat's this long. You're human. You back that corner into a cat into a corner, you'll think you backed a friggin' lion, a saber-toothed tiger into a corner, because he's coming out fighting. Because at that point, what choice does he have? He may go down, but you ain't gonna be happy either. That's the way I look at self-defense. You push me into a corner, I'm going to. What is the first law of conflict? Never underestimate your adversary. If you push me into a corner, I'm going to assume that you're bigger than I am, stronger than I am, faster than I am, you're better trained than I am. I'm going to assume that you're far superior to me, which means I have to fight with everything I have, right? I'm pushed into a corner. I suspect, this is just a possibility, that that's one of the places that Russia has gotten, that they feel backed into a corner and they got to fight. And they're like, look, if we got to fight now, and again, you back me into a corner, I want to get the first punch. If I realize you're coming at me, two people coming at me, whatever, and I realize, this is going to go bad. They intend to harm me. Well, I want the first punch. I want the first punch, and it's going to be a good one. I'll put it like this: if I can strike without you being prepared, boom, right to the, a flat hand, boom, right to the chin. I mean, driving it up from underneath of you, right to the chin. Wham! With everything I got. With one of the guys, I might be able to knock him out or to injure him so bad. If I strike the first person really hard, I might be able to injure that person so bad that I'm only fighting one person now, or that it frightens the other person, right? So I kind of use, and I always use martial arts and self-defense as a reference point when I'm talking to countries, as a metaphor when I'm talking about countries and geopolitics. So my point being, I think that, and let's not forget, Putin is a martial artist, black belt, right? So I'm sure some of these concepts make sense to him. He said, "What did I learn from World War II or Kaliningrad, whatever the hell country it was, Stalingrad? What did I learn? I learned that if you got to fight, if a fight is inevitable, strike first." So I think it makes sense what the president or whoever the hell he is of Serbia is saying, and that is at some point they're going to say, "Here is a offer for peace." Right. And remember what I said, some guys coming at you, "Hey, man, I don't want any trouble." That's the offer for peace. I don't want any trouble. Let's just go our separate ways. You're backing me into a corner. Hey, I don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble. Right. That's the offer for peace. Here's an offer for peace. And you keep coming. At that point, I'm going to have to strike. I'm going to have to say, "Well, you're not responding to my offer for peace. Apparently, a fight is inevitable. I'm hitting first. Maybe I can knock you out with one punch. Maybe I've trained to a point where I have greater, hopefully, either I have a greater capacity to fight longer than you do, to hit harder than you do, to be more accurate than you do, to be more. Maybe I have some advantages, whatever advantages that I have. The sooner I strike, the better I can. The more the better chance I have of taking advantage of those advantages. So again, if Russia says, "Hey, look, man, I don't want any trouble," because let's face it, that's how we got here. In December, they sent a written request to the U.S. empire, to NATO, saying, "Look, guys, I want Ukraine. We need Ukraine to be. We need you to get the hell out of Ukraine, and we need Ukraine to be a sovereign nation, b a non-aligned nation, a disarmed nation, blah blah blah." Right? We need this. And that was their, "Hey, I don't want any trouble." And when the US said, "Well, we're ignoring that," then they started punching first. And so I think that's kind of where the Russians may be at some point. It's time to start looking for two things as we move towards the winter, right? As we move towards the winter. And I'll say this before I get into that a little further. I got a prediction to make. Last August was the Afghanistan debacle, right? Where the U.S., now we consider it a debacle, but the U.S. military industrial complex considers it a great, fantastic, wonderful time for them. But what happened? When the U.S. decided to exit Afghanistan, obviously, so they could look to Russia and China. It was a debacle. It was a disaster. There were people hanging off the fuselage of freaking planes, falling out of the sky. It made the fall of Shanghai the fall of Saigon in 1975 look like a picnic. It was a disaster, right? That was last August. Here's my prediction. This August, you have a similar debacle in Ukraine, where Russia has defeated sometime because now we're in mid-August. What is it? We're mid-August. A month from now, Russia will have defeated Ukraine in the east completely. And there's be nothing between them and the Dnieper River that divides the country there near Lviv. I mean, excuse me, near Kiev. And once they defeat Ukraine, really, there's a number of things they can do. They can go haul ass straight for Kiev. They can haul ass straight. They can cut off. Odessa, there's a lot of troops, Odessa, Kharkov, whatever you call it, all of that stuff. They can go around them and cut them off, right? Where they got a river, they got nothing but the Black Sea. They can kind of surround them and cut them off. They have a lot of options once the main troops in the Donbass are defeated. But at that point, for all intents and purposes, in a way, you can argue that the war is over. What one of the things we're seeing now, one could argue it's kind of over now because what we're seeing now is a lot of troops getting the hell out of Dodge. The Russian shows up at a particular town. They do fight at some towns, but other towns, they get the hell out of there. Smart move. Right. So I predict in August, we're going to see some kind of debacle, some kind of collapse in Ukraine where the military slash political system. Remember, I've been saying this thing ain't going down slow. It's not going down slow. It's going down like a lumberjack, right? It's going down, woo, bam, flat like a tree. And so I am predicting that in August is that when and simply because if you look at where we are right now in July, it's not like I've got some magical powers for God's sake of not or you know that I'm some brilliant geopolitical mind or some shit like that. It's simple. This is the middle of July, and the friggin' Ukrainians are like grabbing people out of bars, throwing these poor schmucks that's sitting there drinking a frickin' Mai Tai. And they grab this guy out of a bar and put a gun in his hand and or her hand and send him to the front line to be torn to pieces by shrapnel. That means that the Ukrainian military is in a bad place. And very short and what happens when that guy gets to or girl gets to the front line? They're trying to get the hell out of there. And soon as it's like, hey, guess what the Russians are approaching, good, I'm going in the other direction, see ya. I mean, just what about all the stuff that the Americans gave us? Yeah, leave it here. The Russians can have it, the Americans can do whatever. We're getting the hell out of here to preserve our lives. Ukrainians are wising up, getting the hell out of there to preserve their lives. Smart move, Ukrainians. Very smart move. So how much longer can we continue with this charade now? Now that if you're in the Ukrainian army, it's obvious. How much propaganda can you get when artillery shells are falling around you or falling around you everywhere? So it's getting obvious now that this thing's over in eastern Ukraine, and that after that, the better part of their military has been taken out. They have more concentrations, sure, but Odessa, Kharkov, things like that. How do they resupply if they get surrounded by the Russians? You know, how do they re-up? They knowing your time is not on your side. After the Russians defeat the eastern Ukraine, you know, reclaim eastern Ukraine. What do you say to if you're a Ukrainian soldier? Yes, sir, we're holding this town now. They can't bring us any supplies. They can't send us any reinforcements. We got nothing, and there's artillery rounds flying in every day, missile strikes, things of that nature. What do we do next? We're going to die eventually. Time ain't on our side. We're going to run out of supplies. We're going to run out of food. We're going to run out of ammunition. We're going to run out of everything. They ain't going to be able to bring us more, and we're out of here. So I suspect that will be a factor, and they've already defeated the better part of our army. What are we doing here again now? What are we defending again? In eastern Ukraine? And you're in a town like Odessa where more people than not prefer you to leave so they can be under the Russians. What are you defending again? What are you, excuse me, defending? What are you dying for? Because ain't no chance you're surviving that one unless you're able to put up a white friggin' flag. So my point being, all of that saying, that's part of the mix. And it even is part of the mix when it comes to the EU and economy for this reason. So you've got this August, I'm guessing, I'm suspecting, I'm predicting this August, some kind of a collapse going on, some kind of an economic military collapse. At the minimum, it's going to be obvious that there ain't no win for the Ukrainians. At the minimum, it's going to be obvious. At the maximum, you're going to have some kind of Ukrainian political / military collapse. In fact, that could start any day now. But I'm going up by August. I think it's blatant and obvious. It may start before August, quite possibly, maybe even likely start before then. But at least in the next couple of weeks, the Russians will have taken Bakhmut and some other places and some major places that major concentrations of Ukrainian troops. So at that point, there's another couple questions that has to arise for the EU. The Russians are winning. Everything we said they can't win, they can't blah 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 is done. It's over. So the question becomes, what are these sanctions for? What are these sanctions for now? We're going to sanction ourselves, destroy our economy and our industries, turn our people against us, right? For something that's already lost. I mean, if you really think about it, they're going to do all of that for something that has already lost. Now you're doing it for a false narrative. You might as well say to the Russians, look, we're going to continue to sanction ourselves because you guys seem to be doing okay. We're going to continue to sanction ourselves until you stop riding on unicorns and hiding your pots of gold at the end of rainbows. And the Russians will be like, well, there's no such thing as unicorns, and we don't have pots of gold. What the hell are you talking about? I don't know. I'm telling you, get off those damn unicorns and stop hiding in pots of gold. It's absurd. The Russians are just going to look and go like, okay, well, we'll be over here doing our thing. Never mind. You nut people are nuts. That's what they're doing. It's going to be, you have to lose in Ukraine, but we've already won in Ukraine. No, you haven't. I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to have to tell their people, the EU is going to have to say to its people, oh, trust me, it may appear. Now, on the surface, it may appear that the Russians have won in Ukraine. Sure, has the Ukrainian army collapsed? Fair enough. Politics, not doing so good. But other than that, other than militarily and economically and politically, all of that has collapsed in Ukraine. But other than that, I'm telling you, they're winning. If you eliminate those three minor factors, they're winning. Therefore, we got to keep the pressure on because Russia's down. Now, okay, fair enough. Inflation is going down in Russia. Their shelves are full. Their economy is doing far better than us. However, on the surface, that may appear that we're losing. But in the same way that it appears that the Ukrainians are losing when actually they're winning, it may appear that, okay, you're hungry, you're cold, and your job's gone, and your industry is closed, and your life's a living hell. On the surface, to the average layman, that may appear like a failure, but we know far better. Look at The Guardian, look at Deutsche Welle, look at France 24. Just read the papers, and the papers will explain to you how, in the face of what appears to be a catastrophic debacle and a complete and total loss, we're really winning because we're going to call this debacle a victory. And we must continue with the debacle. Continue with the victory until such time as the Russians capitulate any day now. Trust me. And meanwhile, it's like the Donner Pass, like they're eating each other. People are wandering the street, moaning, oh, kind of like zombies. But trust me, in the EU, here's what I know about the European citizens. They ain't wandering the street, moaning like zombies. The EU citizens are going to tear shit up. Liz Truss and Olaf Scholz thinks that the people will be docile like they were during COVID. They got another thing coming. You're taking their future. You're taking the futures of their children. And worse than that, you're taking their present. And Russia's, and here's the other thing. It wouldn't surprise me. Now, one of the things the Serbian leader said is, remember, his interpretation, and we don't know if it's true, but let's go with it. Let's discuss this. His interpretation of things is, at some point, the Russians will have won what they want. They'll have taken what they want. They'll have reached their objectives for the most part, and they'll offer to complete their objectives and bring peace. They'll offer a written document. He didn't say that, but I'm saying that because that's the nature of the Russians. If you understand Russian kind of bureaucratic. Remember, Putin's a lawyer. That's the way they think, right? I understand that. I'm going to put you something in writing, and I'm going to make an offer. At some point, the Russians are going to make that written offer. And at that point, what he said was, afterwards, all hell is going to break loose. Now, that could simply mean the Russians are going to go all out and go across Ukraine like a knife through a hot knife through butter. It could mean that. It could also mean that the Russians are going to say, look, we told you to get that infrastructure the hell off our border. You ain't surrounding us. If you want to keep your NATO infrastructure in Romania, if you want to keep it in Poland, if you want to keep it in the Baltic states, we're not saying you can't keep it there, but we're going to say you're going to have to fight to keep it there because we're going to do the best we can to blow the hell out of it and get it off there. And if that's war, so be it. Your decision. War or peace, what do you choose? Now, I suspect that's possible. That's one possibility. Keep in mind something. At that point, all hell breaking loose could also mean that the Russians say, now we've been nice about this gas and oil thing and fertilizer thing and food thing. We've been real nice about this thing. You guys have said to us, we're going to destroy your economy, wipe you out, starve the Russians, regime change. For God's sake, this man must go, can't stay in power, blah, 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 blah. You guys have threatened us. Oh, ethnic Russians can't play football with us. Ethnic Russians can't sing and dance with us. They can't own things if they're rich. We're going to take their planes and their football teams. We hate everything ethnic Russian. And if you're ethnic Russian, you're bad. You guys have been doing that. You played that game long enough. So here's what we're going to do. We're cutting everything off. So if in fact, because this creates a question for NATO and the EU. How important is it to maintain, keep in mind something, from Russia's interpretation and mine, and those of many people, those of John Mearsheimer, those of many intellectuals, right? I'm not saying I'm an intellectual. I'm saying I agree with intellectuals. I'm just a schmuck. But I'm saying from the perspective of a lot of people, the United States game plan is to surround Russia with bases, to choke them like an anaconda to the point where they can cut off their trade, they can cut off their ships, and to do sanctions after sanctions after sanctions, and eventually just destroy Russia, right? That is their plan from a lot of people. And I think if I think that's true, if a lot of intellectuals thinks that's true, if a lot of my people who are watching my show thinks that's true, I suspect that the Russians think it's true. So at that point, I think the Russians are going to say, now we're back. You backed us into a corner with Ukraine. We fought our way out of it, but we ain't out of the corner yet. We don't see ourselves as being out of the corner because now you're going to say it's Sweden, it's Finland. You're going to put more stuff there. So here's what we're going to do. If you feel that it's important enough to surround us with all of this stuff, military hardware from NATO, to threaten us, to continue to build and expand this military hardware from NATO, then apparently you want to fight at some point. At some point, you're cocking a gun at our head because you want to pull the trigger, right? Somebody's, hey, I'm going to fight you. And you look and they're warming up, they're stretching, they're putting on their body, their fighting gear, whatever the case may be, they're preparing to fight you. Hit them before they want to fight you. Hit them hard. When the guy says, I'm going to fix you now, he goes to pull his sweatshirt over his head. Grab the sweatshirt, yank it over his head, and beat the hell out of him before he gets it over his head. Don't wait for your enemy to prepare for battle. In fact, if you can strike your enemy while they're preparing for battle, if you know there's a battle, that's what you got to do, right? So here's my point. Going by the scenario set forth by the Serbian president or prime minister, again, I got to tell you, I don't know which it is. The leader of Serbia, there we go. When Russia says, here's a document, we've defeated Ukraine for all intents and purposes, will you take this peace document, which is going to include you getting the hell off of our border with all this infrastructure? And then, of course, the U.S. empire says, no, we'll never get off your border. You can't tell us what to do. Then the Russia says, okay, well, then we fight. Then we fight. I'm not waiting. You put more stuff on. If I wait, you put more stuff on our border. And then when we finally do fight, you're better equipped to fight. We'd rather fight you now when you're more lightly armed. We're not going to wait, which would be a wise thing to do from a perspective of conflict, right? Well, look, a guy comes and says, I'm going to kick your ass. And you say, well, I really would prefer that you not do that. Can't we be friends? And the guy says, yes. And right now, I'm going to go home and get a baseball bat. When I get back, you're a dead man. Beat his ass right then. Knock him out. Do him in. Because when they get back with the baseball bat, how much chance are you going to have against a baseball bat? You have a chance, but not a good one. One good swing, and you're injured bad. No thanks. You know he's going to go get the baseball bat, attack before he gets the baseball bat. I suspect, and I'm saying all that to get here. If the Serbian leader is right and Russia defeats Ukraine, sends a message to NATO that says, look, here's my peace offer. If as inevitably he suspects will happen, the U.S. empire says, screw you. You know, Jens Stoltenberg and von der Leyen and all of these putzes say, screw you, Russia. We don't listen to you. You will do what we tell you to do, you inferior Slav, lowlife, undermentioned, right? They're below us. You think we're going to listen to you? Ha, ha, ha. Off with you, peasant. That at that point, when the Serbian leader says all hell breaks loose, that means a couple things. Number one, Russia cut off everything. At that point, Russia says, okay. See, the other night you might have watched it. I did a show and I talked about that one of the reasons that the US empire, that the NATO, that the EU can't get in a kinetic war with Russia is because Russia will cut their damn gas off that day. Russia will cut their oil off. Russia will cut everything off. All of this electricity that's going to like some of the Baltic states, Finland, all that, everything that they get from Russia is cut off. And that will be devastating if, in fact, they're at war. Let's say you're Germany. You are at war now with Russia. You know that there's a likelihood that if nukes go throwing around, that you're gone. Likelihood is that nukes go throwing around, you have no chance, you're wiped out. You're going to be a speed bump for nukes. You also know this, they're cutting us the hell off. And that's it for our economy. Nope, not a temporary disruption. Nope, not a temporary issue that you can get through. Nope. What you know is the day they cut you off, you're counting down. You started a countdown. How many days do we have to disaster? 10, 15, 30? At that point, you have no days to disaster because you know it's like we're on Mars at a space station and we look and we're running out of food and we got 20 potatoes. You know you're dead. When that last potato's gone, you might as well walk out into the atmosphere and breathe it in and die because you're a goner. At that point, kinetic war starts. Or, as I said, if in fact that document goes back to Russia with a big red X on it, and Russia says, fair enough. This is what you wanted. This is what you got. Click. No oil. You guys said you wanted to get off of Russian oil. Good news for you. You said you wanted to eventually get away from Russian gas. The future is now. Oops. The future is now. You're out. So part of Russia's offer, maybe, as they say, the same thing that'll make you laugh or make you cry, maybe we can do this peacefully. We don't have to fight. We can move on. Let's put this behind us. But if you don't want to do that, then everything's off. No holds barred. It's all over. Then we're going to consider this a war. And this war for us means NATO has to get off of our border by any means necessary, which means we must inflict any kind of pain that we possibly can on our enemy. Remember, again, what am I going to do if you attack me? What am I going to go after first? You come to get Garland. I'm going to try to strike the groin. I'm going to try to strike the throat. I'm going to try to stroke the eyes. I'm going to kind of snap my hands together on your ears. I'm going to snub the old nose with the foot. I'm going to try to get some fingers and break them, get a joint. Your wrist is a small joint. I'm going to try to get that hand and twist your wrist. I'm going to try to attack you at your weakest points. Right? I've got to assume that you're bigger and stronger. So I must attack the weakest parts of your body, places you can't build muscle on your groin and your eyes, your throat, your windpipe, things of that nature. I've got to attack solar plexus, right? Ribs. I got these floating ribs. I can try to break them. I've got all of these things, the kneecap, things that stomp the front of your foot, your toes, things that are vulnerable. That's where I got to go first. The first place I must attack you is your weak spots, because I must assume, using the principle of conflict, right? I have to assume that you're bigger and stronger and faster and better prepared than I am. I have to make that assumption. Therefore, I must attack all your weakest points as quickly and violently as possible, as accurately as possible, under control, not angry. Right? Okay. So at that point, When Russia sees, okay, Ukraine's done, but the rest of this stuff is still going, I think that's the point where they say, okay, now it's Katie bar the door. Everything goes, and you're weak in the economic realm. We're tearing you to hell right there. That's the first place. You can't survive without this gas. You want to fight with me? The first thing you're going to find out is how it feels not to have gas and oil and fertilizer and all those things. Number one, those are your eyes. I'm poking your eyes. Those are your throat. That's everything I can get, right? The first thing you're going to feel, because if you back me into a corner, I will bite you. I will. Isn't that what an animal will do? If you back them into a corner, they'll bite you, they'll scratch you, they'll do anything they can. If you bite me and if you back me into a corner, that's the way I'm trained. And you're trying to kill me, bite, scratch, twist, anything. There's no rules. Anything I can get my hands on, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to throw dirt in your face. I'm going to put something around your neck and try to choke you, right? If I'm backed into a corner, there are no rules. Anything is a weapon. It now becomes, this is about survival. One of us might not come out of this a corner, but I'm going to make sure that I'm one that comes out. At least one comes out. That's me, right? At that point, I think Russia says, boom, okay. That's why I think going into the winter, there is at minimum, I would argue, a 50% chance, maybe considerably higher, that the EU goes into next winter with no Russian gas before the winter. Now, if Russia wants maximum power, right? If they want maximum effect, what they'll do is they will drag this thing out, even if they get the defeat in Donbass, let's say in August, in the next several weeks. Let's say they do that. They still want to continue with their offensive. They still want to take their time because you want it to get cold. And they're not going to turn the gas back on. The gas is off right now for EU. They're not going to turn it on enough that the EU can fill their storage tanks. They're going to just give them a trickle so they can survive. You want to keep them surviving. You want to just give them enough blood, just give them enough water, just give them enough that they can make it. So that when you cut them off, they feel the pain instantly. So Russia does that, then Russia just waits for it to get cold, good and cold. And that's when they deliver this. Here's the paper. Let's make peace. And then the U.S. says, we ain't doing that. No, sirree, you get nothing. Why, we shall defeat you for sure. We got some more HIMARS rockets and all this bullshit, right? And that's when Russia says, okay, we need to know something by, whatever, give them a day. November 1st, December 1st. Okay, December 1st is here. The answer is no. And Russia says, good enough. Click. That's it. Oh, by the way, your gas and everything's cut off. Wait a minute. Oh, by the way, you better, at that point, we're ready to fight. You've made a decision. You're ready to fight. We're ready to fight, but we're fighting with everything. How can, let me ask you this, even if they fight, how can a country maintain a war when the people at home are hungry and miserable? How can the EU even fight Russia? Right? How can the EU fight Russia if the people don't have food, if it's wintertime and the people are freezing? What do you think they're going to do? All righty, guys. As the people are saying, our government's destroying us, and they're like overrunning town hall, city hall, government hall. And they say to the people, look, I know you guys are pissed at us, hungry and cold and furious at us, but here's what we'd like you to do. Put on this uniform, get some training, and go die fighting for Russia. The people ain't going to hear them. The countries are not. Let me add this. With that kind of economic pain, the European countries wouldn't be stable enough to handle a war. How are you going to handle a major war when your country is in meltdown economically? When all of your major industries close? Remember, during a war, what do countries do? They put everybody into work, and the industries are rolling and everybody's working. You can't even build missiles or tanks because all of your factories are closed down. Russia turns it off. Guess what? All of the industrial capacity of Europe to produce war material is shut off. They can't do it. Bad news. So, that's the bottom line. I think, I think that's what we're looking at for the future of, that's what we're looking at. Some possibilities just thrown out there for the possibility of the EU over the next 6 to 8 months. I just see very little possibility that the EU goes into the winter with any Russian gas, which means it's game, set, and match for the EU at that point. That I think if the Russians cut them off at some point or don't turn them back on here in July, which I think they'll turn them back on. I think they got to keep them on the hook for a while. If they turn them off, what happens is the EU then disintegrates into chaos to a point where the leaders of the EU don't have enough political power and political capital to continue as vassals for the United States, where the only way that the EU can exist as a body, can exist as individual countries, is to make a deal with Russia to get the natural resources that they need back online. I mean, what's Germany going to do if it's with no industry? No industry. These gigantic, I think BASF employs like 40,000 people at one plant or something. I mean, big numbers. Mercedes-Benz, Bosch, on a company after company after company. What's going to happen to Germany if they all shut down? And at some point, at this point, here's what I would say. It is inevitable that the confrontation is getting to the point where that will be on the table, that at some point they will have to bargain. And part of that bargaining chip, if they just ignore Russia's demands, at some point, Russia's going to have to pull the trigger on them. I'm not saying have to. I mean, at some point, Russia's going to pull the trigger on them and cut them off and leave them so economically crippled that they're not a threat. And see, that's what I'm saying. At that point, Russia leaves the EU so economically crippled that the EU is no longer able to threaten Russia. That the motive, that what they're going to do is they're going to change the motivations of the EU. If you attack me and I break your wrist, I get a hold on that of your little finger. Pow! And I snap that finger. Your motivations change, don't they? I don't care how big you are. I get that finger. Somehow you grab me and I get my hands on that finger and I snap it. Pow. And you look, and this finger, all these fingers are heading in this direction. And this one is heading south. Your motivations change. When you look at that, it'll throw you into shock. I don't care how big and strong you are. You're going to look at that and you're not going to want to fight anymore. At that point, you want to go deal with this metal. You want to get to the emergency room. Holy shit, my finger's pointing in the wrong direction, and excruciating pain, right? You shouldn't have backed me in a corner. I wouldn't have snapped your damn finger. So think about this. So from the perspective of Russia's dealing with the EU, that's their finger. That's their weak spot. If I poke you in the eyes, at that point, you're in so much pain that you're like, I don't know if I want any more of this. I got to go deal with the fact that my industry shut down and I got so much pain, I can't deal with it. I think that's what Russia does at some point. They put them in so much pain that the EU has to make a decision. Decision one, we allow our economy to go into complete free fall and meltdown, which turns into social chaos and endangers the lives of politicians, to be quite frank. And we do that just so we can hang on with the United States and continue to challenge Russia. Or we make a deal with Russia and get the hell out of this mess. I don't know what they're going to do, but I think that's where we're heading to. All right, let me look. Oh my gosh, we got people over there on Rockfin. Oh, no tips on Rockfin, but that's okay. I certainly thank people. I thank everybody for watching. If you can do a tip on Rockfin, wonderful. We got some people with some super chats. Hooray. Emery Chin, Mearsheimer groupie here. John says, when a deep state faces a choice between economic prosperity and security, they will choose security every time. Funny, they don't question who determines a a security threat. Yeah, but that works until people tear the damn country apart. They may say, hey, we got to deal with security. But what's that? Part of security is 100,000 people outside of the Parliament building with ropes and pitchforks. Think about that. Security could mean you're about to as they say, in times of crisis, some cuts may have to be made, and then there's a guillotine outside. The cuts are going to be your friggin' head coming off. Emery also says, oh, we already got that one. Let's continue. We got some more super chats, and I appreciate the super chat. Let's look at Red Pill Scholar. In the US, people will take to the streets for LGBT, pot, abortion, possible nuclear war. Nah, maybe if you can frame it as connected to those issues. That's a good one. That's funny. Red Pill Scholars. Hilarious. Oh, we got another one. Someone who I can't read that because I don't read that it appears to be Russian. Why are the EU countries that suicidal in terms of the conflict and communications with Russia? Because they're not countries, because they are colonies doing what their masters are told. So they're not countries. The leaders are not leaders of countries. The leaders are vassals doing what they're told by their masters. In DC, the Dutch have gas, but Brussels told us to sell it to Germany. Yeah, and they're going to do what they're told. Let's see what else we got. How about this? Is now a good time to learn Russian or Chinese? How about this? Hey, Mr. Nixon, can you go on Tucker? Your wisdom is needed there. More people should hear your thoughts. I've been on Tucker. A lot of people don't know. I've been on Tucker before. I've been on several times. I used to be with Fox for years, and I did. I've been on every Fox show. I never went on. What's his name? Chris. What's his name? The Irish guy. What's his name? He's a real friggin' nutcase. I can't think of his name. But at any rate, I never Hannity, Sean Hannity, excuse me. I've never been on Hannity's, but all the rest of them I used to be on all the time. So I was a lefty arguing with the people on Fox, but I was very good friends with people. Me and Eric Bolling, I was a buddy. Eric Bolling and I are very good friends with Laura Ingram. A lot of people there I got along really, really well with. Even though I disagreed with him. Yosemite Sam is my favorite arch neocon. Love that. You'll say he's a rootinist, tootinist, two-gun shootinist, all that stuff. All right, let's look. We got some people on Rockfin. Thank you, Rockfin. All right. Thank you for the tips on Rockfin. I appreciate all the people that help keep the channel going here. I know there's a tip here, then I'm missing it. Oh, there we go. Tom Nixon. Hey, of all people, Tom Nixon is thanking it gave me a tip. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Look, everyone, I got to get ready to run. It's 10 a.m. So I got big things going. But listen, if you look in the show notes, you can go to buymeacoffee.com. That's buymeacoffee.com /Garland in with an H. That's all in the show notes. You can see that here. Garland in and then some weird H behind. They put that before. I don't know. You can do that to certainly or Patreon. Some people don't like Patreon. But you can become a patron there, or you can donate. You can go to buymeacoffee.com. My paypal.com information is there. garlandin@gmail.com. You can use that. Also, I would like to ask everybody to join my Rockfin channel. That's also in the show notes, rockfin.com /Garland Nixon. Please, they could cut me off at any time. So everybody who's watching on YouTube or watching on Twitter, please go to my YouTube page and become and click to subscribe. Make sure you click the little bell. Also, Rockfin, you can become a subscriber, no cost, or a member. I would certainly appreciate anybody that could become a member at $9.99 a month. That helps keep the channel going. Thanks a lot. I really enjoy this. I have a good time interacting with all my friends, and I have a good time, giving my 2 cents worth. I don't know how much sense it makes, but this is what I think based on my studying, based on everything I've been picking up, studying. Evaluating the people I've been talking to over the past several years, for years, as I've studied Russia and Eastern Europe. And I think that if you listen to what I say, I'm not saying it's accurate, but it's not crazy. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's at least worth consideration. Shout out to the people over at Duran, my favorite channel. Shout out to the new Atlas and Patrick Lancaster and PTE Politics, the world gone crazy. And certainly my gray zone friends, and on and on and on. Jimmy Dore, you name it. Thanks a lot. Peace. Slow News Day. Never forget Slow News Day over at Rockfan. Certainly, Nico House, my main man, Nico. Love Nico. Peace. I'm out. Oh, and I don't want to leave out Danny Highfong, the left lens, and of course the one and only Caleb Maupin. Peace. I'm out.